Om. 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 Satchidananda Rupaya Vishwotpatyadi Hetave Tapatraya Vinashaya Shri Krishnaya Vayam Numaha. Janmadhyasya yatonvayadi tarataschaiteshvabhignaswarat Tene Brahma Hridaya Adi Kavaye Muhyanti Yatsurayaha Tejo Vari Mridam Yatha Vinimayo Yatra Trisargo Mrisha Dhamna Svena Sada Nirasta Kuhakam Satyam Param Dhimahi Dharma Projita Kaita Votra Paramo Nirmatsaranam Satam Vedyam Vastavamatra Vastu Shivadam Tapatrayonmulanam Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite Kim Vaparerishwaraha Sadyo Hridya Varudyate Trakritibihi Shushrushubistatchana. Hariom and greetings from Flint. We have many new seekers to Srimad Bhagavatam. What I just chanted was, the first prayer is sharing, it is only Bhagavan Krishna who can finally help us. Neither our parents, neither the government. Finally, it's our Bhagavan who can help us with all of the problems we have in life. Do you all acknowledge that? Any experienced thinking person will acknowledge this. The second prayer shares the purpose of one's life is to learn how to contemplate. It's not IQ, it's not family. It is Satyam Param Dhimahi, to learn how to contemplate on consciousness, because then you change into consciousness. And the third prayer, the way to prepare yourself for contemplation is dharma. To treat your responsibilities as an opportunity to evolve. And what's most lovely about this, our youngest son is around 3 years old and he's getting to know about living. Our responsibilities, let's say, start at 3 years old. That means we have decades of opportunities. It is our fortune to have such opportunities. So now I've briefed all of you. They've been studying for 4.5 years. You got it in 4.5 minutes. How many of you have seen the movie Moulin Rouge? By a show of hands. It's a fun movie, lots of great songs. One of the quotes that comes out a lot in this movie is, I'm reading it exactly, the greatest thing you'll ever learn is just to love and be loved in return. I'm going to say it again. The greatest thing you'll ever learn is just to love and be loved in return. This is actually a lyric from David Bowie, who's a great singer. When one reflects on this quote, when we know how much someone loves us, it becomes more natural to return that love. Agreed? When my parents travel, to Trinidad, to Bharat, and so on, then I look after their home, I look after their business, I look after their car, and so on. And I think my parents know that I love them, but sometimes when I share, I shoveled your driveway and I moved this money around and so on, then they love me more. And as humans, we have this tendency to take for granted, correct? So we do that in a very familial way. We most definitely do that in a metaphysical way. Bhagwan loves us the most. And Srimad Bhagavatam provides the details of how Bhagwan loves us the most. That way, we return that love. That way, we feel that we belong to Bhagwan. I had shared with some seekers in London recently that our hearts are closed. And when we come to know the details of a leela, tell me the English word for leela. Sport, drama. Yeah, our life is more like a drama, less like a sport, more like a drama. The etymology of this word is leenam bhavam lati prakatayati, which means the potential in one's heart is released. When one knows the details of how much Bhagavan Krishna loves you, what's holding you back starts to melt away, and you just become one who is more loving. I'm going to check here, and I'm looking in this area at those who are offering disrespect to me and to this class, and if I see it again, you'll be outside. So you sit in the front or you go outside. Those are your choices. Clear? I'll continue. And this is all recorded too. I'm open about my discipline. Skanda 10, the 10th section, is known as Ashraya. This is what the theme of the 10th section is. The 11th skanda or section is Mukti. Ashraya means support. Mukti means freedom. Sharing this in a different way, the 10th section is the heart of Srimad Bhagavatam. The 11th section is the head. Sharing this in a different way, the 10th section is about Saguna Brahma. That is infinity who expresses with a certain form and name. The 11th section is about Nirguna Brahma. It is infinity without form and name. And the implication of this is that Bhagavan Krishna's body is going to die. Bhagavan Krishna's body is going to return to its source. So the 10th section is very sporty. The 11th section is very dramatic. And sharing this in the most simple way, the 10th section is about Bhagavan Krishna's life, and the 11th is about Bhagavan Krishna's teaching. Most of us are only exposed to the 10th skanda. Bhagavan Krishna married this person, Bhagavan Krishna lived in this kingdom. But if that was a finality, why would there be section 11? Throughout Srimad Bhagavatam, we have listened to many Gitas. Like Pranaya Gita, this is when the gopis come together and they beg for Bhagavan. We have listened to Dattatreya Gita, where Rishi Dattatreya says, you can learn from everything. You can learn from a spider. You can learn from your own body. The beauty of a Gita, Gita means song. These Gitas are a lovely way for us to follow this song to Bhagavan. Yesterday, we had a camp for kids, and the theme was Hinduism equals environmentalism. And I had shared with all of the kids that came, there are 5 directions that are dedicated to us, and we in turn have to be dedicated to those directions. Do you remember this? And you've been briefed on this. Those directions are nature's forces, nature's beings, society, family, and our guides. And so I shared with all of these kids 5 verbs. For nature's forces, thank. For nature's beings, help. For society, support. For family, share. And what was the verb for our guides? Follow. Our guides, they offer this song, and we are to follow. How many of you have been on a yatra with me, by show of hands? Here some, here lots. When we are in a crowded place, like walking through Kochi as an example, and there's thousands of cars and millions of people, if you don't follow our group, what happens to you? You're still in Bharat then, correct? You never came home. So all of these Gitas, we are to follow them, and I'm building up for the special Gita that we're going to experience today, offering more setup before we get into our next Gita. In chapter 20, Bhagavan Krishna teaches the different paths, the different yogas like karma, jnana, and bhakti. Let's have a quick vote. How many of you feel karma yoga is the best path? By show of hands. Jnana yoga? Oh, so everyone just keeps putting their hand up. All yogas are good. Bhakti yoga? This usually happens when I ask people about these different yogas. The minimum hands are up for bhakti. Because our education system is intellectual. Our workplaces are intellectual. We even study Vedanta in an intellectual way. We have big heads and small hearts, correct? Bhagavan Krishna says bhakti is the best yoga. Because in bhakti, the means and the ends are the same. Yesterday, I was asking one of the high school students about why she goes to school. When she said to get a resume, to go to college, to get a job. And it was going on for so long, till finally she said, to be happy. And then I had nothing to question. Bhakti is the same way. The means and the ends are the same. Why postpone happiness when you can be happy in the present? So this is what Bhagavan shares. And reading to you a practical way for us to follow bhakti. Plavam sukalpam guru karnadharam. The boat of your life, the loving guru, should be the captain. The guru is a bhakta. If you follow a bhakta, what will happen? You will be following bhakti. Plavam sukalpam guru karnadharam. Chapter 21, a most practical chapter on relativity. I'm here with Shankarji right now. We've been together for 8 days now. And Shankarji is an intense philosophical teacher. So many times he's talking about things I have no idea what he's talking about. And he was teaching about relative moralism. I can't even pronounce that. And his point is that morality is relative. For someone who is less evolved, being kind is the purpose of their life. But for someone who's more evolved, dedicating their life is morality. And Bhagavan Krishna shares the same sentiment in this chapter, that living in the relative is exhausting. If you keep going around, this is good, that is bad, I like this, I dislike this, It's like living on eggshells. Do you have some of those relationships where you have to walk on eggshells? They're exhausting relationships. Today, I was sharing with some seekers how the hardest part of my life has been dedicating myself to Sanatana Dharma with a family. Dedicating one's life to Sanatana Dharma is hard. Being in a family is hard. Yes, everyone? Yes, everyone. And then if you combine them, it becomes the hardest. And I describe this to them as being in an airport that never closes. See, there's airports that close, correct? In my travels, I've had to sleep in many airports, missed flights, this and that. And the airports that close, it's awesome. I got this bench by myself. I don't have to sleep with anyone. No one's going to wake me up. But to sleep in those airports that never close, just keep hearing that PA system and this person's doing this and that person's doing that. That's what living in the relative is like. You just get so exhausted focusing on the relative. And so Bhagavan Krishna is sharing here to be bigger than the relative, to tune into the absolute. Reading to another quarter here. Kamadeva kalirnam. Bhagavan says that when you're distracted by the relative, what happens is you become desirous. And what does desire lead to? Kali. What are some English definitions of Kali? English definitions. Anyone? Kali means selfishness. Kali means fast. We live in a fast time, correct? Fast internet. Kali means conflict. When one goes about living in the relative, inevitably there will be conflict. Chapter 22 is about classifications of creation. What has made creation? How to classify creation? And some of the main thoughts that Bhagavan shares here. If you go about classifying all the time, your mind gets agitated. And if you can quieten your mind, you don't get lost in numbers. You're able to see the big picture. Do you find Srimad Bhagavatam to be a scholarly text or a devotional text? See, if we study Vedanta in a scholarly way, we're not studying Vedanta. You're approaching Vedanta with an agitated mind. Vedanta is to be internalized. Yesterday, I had mentioned to all of you, if you're not reflecting, then what are you doing? Deflecting, exactly. As I'm sharing this, if you feel Srimad Bhagavatam is a historical text, what are you doing? Deflecting. That's what Bhagavan is trying to get out of us, to quieten one's mind. And he ends this chapter sharing, as you think, so you develop. If you keep thinking about this classification, you're going to die and be born into the same classification. But if you rise above this, as you think, so you develop, when you die, you'll be closer to Bhagavan. There's only oneness. And this chapter really ends with Rishi Uddhava sharing, Su duhasam imam manye. Bhagavan is sharing that when one rises above, they can be tormented and still not be affected. And Rishi Uddhava is sharing, how is it possible that someone is bothering you so much, but your mind is still quiet? And this leads us to chapter 23. Chapter 23 is known as a Gita, Bhikshu Gita. In English, the Song of the Mendicant. And the implication of this song is, To rise above likes and dislikes, one needs to nurture titiksha. Can someone tell me an English word for titiksha? Endurance. Yesterday in our Balavar camp, we are focusing on earth. So I asked all of the students to put their clothes on and to walk around the ashram, hugging the trees, feeling the snow. And many made it all the way around. Some, they're so wise, they just walked halfway and came back. See, some are like Bhagwan Ganesha. I'll just walk around my parents rather than walking around this world. Endurance. How many of you feel endurance is one of your strengths? You're an enduring personality. I wish I could turn the camera on. There's not a single hand up. How do you know if you're not an enduring person? You're easily annoyed. Enduring, annoying, or antonyms. But the evolution of endurance, and we've been hammering this out in Bhagavad Gita, is sthane. Sthane means acceptance. My wife is here right now. Our anniversary is coming up in some months. And I always joke about this. Imagine on our anniversary, we're on date night. And I share, for the past 13 years, your husband has been most enduring of you. Right? I'm subtly insulting her. But if I share for the past 13 years, I've accepted you, it still doesn't sound nice, but it's better. Correct? It's better. So this titiksha has to lead to sthane. And that's what this Gita is very much about. Endurance is not built into your muscles. It is built into your mind. And I gave all of you last week a practice for your mind. ECO. Do you remember what ECO stands for? Economics, ecology. Our mind should only be engaged in 3 verbs. E is engage. C, chant. And O is observe. Right now, as Vivek is trying to teach, I'm engaging. When this class is over and I'm with my children, then Vivek's mind is chanting. Bhagwan, help. Save me. Sharanagati. But the best utilization of Vivek's mind is to observe that mind. So if you want to be one who's less irritable, less opinionated, eco, engage, chant, observe. And I'll even give you a visualization for this. Engage is when your car is on the road, or you are on the road, let's say. Chant is when you are in your garage. You're neither outside where it's so rough, but you're not inside either. It's still cold and dark. And observe is when you're in your home, in your bed, with your covers on. You're most natural, correct? So now as you go about driving, parking, getting ready to sleep, try to visualize this with your mind. With this orientation, we begin Bhikshu Gita. How many of you have studied this before by a show of hands? I see 1.5 hands here. Puja Swami Tejomayananda has given such importance to this, Guruji has, that there's an independent book just on Bhikshu Gita. Okay? We begin with verse 23. Verse 23. Swarga pavarga yordvaram prapya lokam imam puman dravine nu sajjeta martyo narthasya dhamani. This means, I'm reading the translation for you, when a human, having achieved this human life, which is the very entrance to heaven, that is Swarga, and Apavarga, which means enlightenment, would willingly become attached to wealth, to worthlessness. And there's a question mark there. Why would a human depend on wealth when as a human, you can go to heaven, you can be free? That's what this verse is teaching. Elaborating on this, Bhagavan Krishna shares to Rishi Uddhava, there is hardly any human that is not reactive. When I say, how come you came late? So Vivek is already reacting to you. And what are you doing? How come you came on time? There's hardly any human that's not reactive. So Bhagavan is acknowledging Rishi Uddhava's proposition to be tormented and to still endure, to accept. This seems very impossible. Bhagavan acknowledges this, and he goes on to share an incident about a person who was attached to wealth and then detached from wealth, and this made him more enduring and more accepting. This person doesn't have a name. His name is just Brahmana, seeker. And what's lovely about this is because we can relate to this. And what is described about this person is he never engaged in the Pancha Mahayajna. I just briefed you on this. Nature's forces, nature's beings, society, family, rishi, guides are always giving to us. But someone who is attached to wealth, they don't give back. So this person never gave back. This person just hoarded this wealth. And he's described as going from being a Brahmana to being a Bhuta. What is the English word for Bhuta? A ghost, and here it says goblin. This person became a zombie. Have you all seen the second Lord of the Rings movie? How many of you have seen the second Lord of the Rings movie? You don't get Lord of the Rings in Michigan, is that what? So there's this king who sits on this throne, and he wears a crown. And the longer he's there, the more old he becomes. And then finally, I think it's Gandalf the White. He symbolizes sattva for your reference. So even Lord of the Rings is a copy of Sanatana Dharma. So he essentially shakes him off of this. And as soon as he's shaken off this throne and crown, he starts to become younger again. He goes from being a zombie to being a human. So he's a Brahmana, he becomes a Bhuta, he's living in a zombie-like way, and eventually all that he's hoarding is taken from him. I always share this with my mother particularly. During Deepavali, my mother puts Bhagavati's Lakshmi's feet outside of her home. How many of you do that? You draw them or you paste them and so on. Our Upa-acharya, his name is Swami Shardananda, he had shared, when you put Bhagavati Lakshmi's feet coming into your home, you also have to put her feet leaving your home. And the method, the teaching of that is, she comes with grace, leaves that, and then goes and shares that with others. But what do? Come. And then we lock the door. Lock the door. This is Jagat Mata. She doesn't care about your Schlage lock or whatever lock you have in your home. She's going to take more than what she came with. So for him too, here is the proof. He was hoarding, and all of this was taken from him in different ways. And Bhagavan Krishna shares, eventually though, he started to engage in dhyayata, which means he was thinking about his life. Who I was, who I am. And this dhyayata led to nirveda, to this understanding that wealth is not going to make him happy. And Bhagavan goes to the extent of sharing this revelation came from kripa. For many people who invested in the FTX, I think it's FTX, or SVB Bank, now Credit Suisse, UBS, First Republic, and anyone who has their wealth over here, when that all goes away, what do we think about? How much of a loss we're in. But what this person thought about was, this didn't make me happy anyways. Whether it's there or not there, it didn't make me happy. And then he started to live for yajna. He dedicated himself to Bhagavan. Now, here's a greater detail about his titiksha and his sthane. This Brahmana lived with people, but he was mean to people, disrespected them, never shared. And when everything was lost, he went back to them asking for respect, asking for resources. And here's what they did to him. Lots of details are given. I'm just sharing some of them. These people, when he would come to them with his bag or his bowl, they would take it from him and then pretend to give it back, but then take it again. That's what children do, correct? So they would trick him. When he would have food and he would go to the river to wash his hands or face, they would urinate in his drinking vessel, in his eating vessel. They accused him of being a thief. Imagine I walk over here and say, that person stole my computer. Even though they didn't, but all of you would think negatively about that person, correct? They tricked, they urinated, they accused. There's so much detail. They gave their durvata. Do you know what durvata means? Vata means air, dur means foul air. You're getting it. The etymology of foul air is fart. Even that detail is given in Sanskrit. And that's why it's important to study Bhagavatam. Don't be like those people. And one more, and this is the worst. They would tie him up like an animal. Tie his hands, tie his feet like an animal. And the entire time, he did not react. He endured, he accepted with the one insight that this is my prarabdha. This is how I lived, and so this is what I deserve. He never escaped. He endured, he accepted. This is the build-up to Bhikshu Gita. Now, actual Bhikshu Gita, please remember this, is verses 43 to 58. 43 to 58. This is 16 verses that are incredible. The teachings from this Bhikshu, you know, when I was reading this, I was just so excited to share this with all of you, but it's already 11:35. So I'm just going to share one verse with all of you. This is verse 44. Verse 44. Mano gunan ve srijate baliyaha tatascha karmani vilakshanani shuklani krishnyan yathalohitani tebhya savarna shritayo bhavanti. The translation. The powerful mind actuates the functions of the material modes. That translation is too complicated. I'll make it simpler. The powerful mind generates the modes and movements of the senses. So the mind is your senses boss. Out of the senses proceed actions which are sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic. So my senses then do things which help me to devolve or evolve. And here's the important part. And your actions then go on to determine your fate. To become an animal, to become a deva, to become a human. Again, I need more time to elaborate on this, so I'm going to give you just one insight. So I gave you the verse. Here's one insight on how we can learn to endure more and to accept more. This bhikshu shares that I and you have the same presence inside of us. So if I harm you and you are harming me, but we have the same presence, then really no one is harming anyone. And the example given is one's tongue and teeth. Is it your tongue? It's your teeth. When your teeth as if harm your tongue, what do? You don't react. You endure, correct? So if I feel the presence in you and the presence in me is the same, who's harming who? One more insight that I've never heard before, only in Bhikshu Gita. Each of our limbs has a specific devata that looks after it. Like for our eyes, the devata is the sun or fire. Let's say sun. Now suppose my eyes look at you in the wrong way. That's how I teach, correct? So my eyes are looking at you in the wrong way, but it's the same devata, the sun for my eyes and the sun for your eyes. So who's harming who? It's the same sun in my eyes and in your eyes. So there's no harm. With this knowledge, enduring and accepting becomes more relatable, more possible, and lots more is shared. I'll give you more insights into all of this next week in our class, but for the sake of those who may not join me next week, this Bhikshu Gita ends with, this is the problem, this is the solution. Whoever hears with faith and devotion this song of the mendicant, dealing with the subject of establishment in consciousness, or makes others hear it and themselves constantly think over it, will not be overcome by the contradictions of life. This whole section is talking about relativity. If you can endure and accept, that's the same as rising above relativity. Oh.